Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare.
गजेंद्र आवाज नहीं आ रही आपकी।
I think you are muted.
हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपीकांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कंचन गौरंगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये। बोलो श्री राधे गोलोकानंद भगवान की जय। तो श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय।
जय
हरे कृष्णा।
हरे कृष्णा।
हरे कृष्णा तरुण। हरे कृष्णा अजय।
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
जप में तो आ रही थी ना आवाज जप की?
हाँ आ रही।
हाँ,
खाली मेरी नहीं आती। ओके ओके। ऑलराइट। शुरू करते हैं। तो कल अपन लोग श्लोक 5 पढ़ रहे थे। वी स्टार्टेड चैप्टर 20th और 20th चैप्टर इज अबाउट अपीयरेंस ऑफ लॉर्ड विष्णु। महाराज पृथु जो अश्व यज्ञ कर रहे हैं उसमें लॉर्ड विष्णु अपीयर होते हैं इंद्रदेव के साथ। एंड जैसा कि अपन लोग लास्ट अध्याय में पढ़ रहे थे कि अश्व में एक यज्ञ कर रहे हैं महाराज पृथु, बट जो 100th अश्व है उसको इंद्रदेव ले आते हैं। सो ही इज नॉट एबल टू कंप्लीट हिज 100th अश्व यज्ञ। लेकिन तो फिर लॉर्ड ब्रह्मा अपीयर होते हैं। लॉर्ड ब्रह्मा देन एक्सप्लेन्स टू इंद्रदेव दैट इट्स ओके नॉट टू डू द 100th वन and to also pardon Indradev. Yeah. And then actually in this adhyaya what we are reading is Lord Vishnu appears along with Indradev. Yeah. And then Indradev asks for the pardon and Maharaj Prithu फिर उसको इंद्रदेव को माफ करते हैं। ठीक है। And then Lord Vishnu is now speaking to Prithu Maharaj. That's what we were reading yesterday, right? Shlok 5th. And he's saying that those who are in full knowledge of the bodily conception of life, who know that this body is composed of nescience, desires and activities resulting from illusion. Says here, avidya, kam, karma. That's how the kaya imam, yeah. This body is composed of all those things, desires and activities, which are nothing but results from Maya. Yeah. Do not become addicted to the body. And why is Lord Vishnu giving this Updesh to Maharaj Prithu? So that he can do his anti-thoughts about Indradev. Yeah. And actually it's a nice purport. So let's read that. Tarun. Sorry.
As stated in a previous verse, those with good intellect, Sudhiya, do not accept themselves to be the body. Being a creation of nescience, the body has two types of activities. In the bodily conception, when we think that sense gratification will help us, we are in illusion. Another kind of illusion is to think that one will become happy by trying to satisfy the desires that arise from the illusory body, or by attaining elevation to the higher planetary systems, or by performing various types of Vedic rituals. This is all illusion. Similarly, material activities performed for political emancipation and social and humanitarian activities performed with an idea that people of the world will be happy are also illusory, because the basic principle is the bodily conception, which is illusory. Whatever we desire or perform under the bodily conception is an illusion. In other words, Lord Vishnu informed Prithu Maharaja that although the sacrificial performances set an example for ordinary people, there was no need for such sacrificial performances as far as his personal self was concerned, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Taigunya Visaya Veda Nitraye Gunya Bhavarjana Nirdhavando Ryo Nitya Sattva Sto Niryoga Shema Atmavan. The Vedas mainly deal with the subject of the three modes of material nature. Rise above these modes, O Arjuna. Be transcendental to all of them. Be free from all dualities and from all anxieties for gain and safety, and be established in the self. The ritualistic performances recommended in the Vedas mainly depend on the three modes of material nature. Consequently, Arjuna was advised to transcend the Vedic activities. The activities Arjuna was advised to perform were the transcendental activities of devotional service. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, so I think pretty important, right? Basically, what is being mentioned is anything which we are doing, thinking from the bodily conception, is an illusion, is temporary, right? So even if you are doing the yajna and we are asking for, let's say, wealth and health and all those things, is also an illusion. Even though we can do that, and you can achieve it by doing the yajna. But what Lord Vishnu is saying is like for people like Prithu Maharaj, who is also none other than actually Ansa Avatar of Lord Vishnu himself, is already so high on devotional services, so he's saying there is no need for him to perform those kind of yajna, is what is being mentioned here, right? The next slok, Ajay.
Sure. Asamsaktah sharirer asmin munotpadite grihe apatte dravine vapikah puryan mamatam buddha. How can a highly learned person who has absolutely no affinity for the bodily conception of life can be affected by the bodily conception in regard to house, children, wealth, and similar other bodily productions? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So Lord Vishnu is talking to Prithu Maharaj. Yeah. एकः शुद्धः स्वं ज्योति निर्गुणो असो गुणाश्रयः सर्वगो अनावृतः साक्षी निरात आत्मा आत्मनः परः. So the individual soul is one, pure, non-material, and self-effulgent. He is the reservoir of all good qualities, and he is all-pervading. He is without material covering, and he is the witness of all activities. He is completely distinguished from other living entities, and he is transcendental to all embodied souls. Yeah, so he's also Sakshi, and he is Shyam Jyoti. Yeah, that's what the soul is, pure, Shuddha, right? And again, it's a very nice purport. So let's read this, Karun.
In the previous words, two significant words are used. Asamsaktah, meaning without attachment, and Buddha, meaning fully cognizant of everything. By full cognizance, it is meant that one should know about his own constitutional position as well as the position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. According to Sri Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakura, in this verse, Lord Vishnu is describing himself, or the Paramatma. The Paramatma is always distinguished from the embodied soul as well as the material world. Therefore, he has been described as Para. That Para or Supreme Personality of Godhead is Eka, meaning one. The Lord is one, whereas the conditioned souls embodied within the material world exist in many varieties of form. There are demigods, human beings, animals, trees, birds, bees, and so forth. Thus, the living entities are not eka but many, as confirmed in the Vedas. Nityo Nityam Chetanas Chetanam. The living entities who are many and who are entangled in this material world are not pure. However, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is pure and detached. Due to being covered by the material body, the living entities are not self-effulgent, but the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Paramatma, is self-effulgent. The living entities, being contaminated by the modes of material nature, are called Saguna, whereas Paramatma, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is Nirguna, not being under the influence of the material modes. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, so as we can see, right, the distinction between Atma and Paramatma is what is described, right? So we are a soul, right? And we are linked to the super soul. A lot of people will say, oh, the Atma and Paramatma is one, right? It's all one. But that's not the case, right? There's an Atma and there is a Paramatma. And that is what the difference is. And what is the difference, right? Like the other living entities are contaminated by the modes of material nature, right? We have three modes of material nature, as you know, right? Satogun, Rajogun, and Tamogun. But Paramatma, even though all these modes are generated from himself, from the Paramatma himself, right? He is not under the influence of the material modes. He is in the spiritual, purely spiritual world, right? That's why he is called Nirgun, because he is not in one of those three gunas. Whereas all of us are influenced by those three gunas. Yeah, that's what is being mentioned here. Yeah, and as you can see, the conditioned souls embodied within the material world exist in many varieties of form, right? So we can take forms, the bodily forms, which are like maybe demigods, devatas, human beings, animals, trees, birds, bees, and so forth, right? We see those 8.4 million species. So the soul can take shape of any of those bodies depending on the karma and everything else, right? That's what is being mentioned. Ajay?
Sure. The living entities being engaged in material qualities are gunasrita, whereas the Supreme Personality of Godhead is gunasraya. The conditional soul's vision is created by material contamination. Therefore, he cannot see the cause of his action, and he cannot see his past lives. The Supreme Personality of Godhead not being covered by a material body is a witness of all the activities of living entity. But both of them, the living entity and the Paramatma, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, are Atma or Spirit. They are one in quality, yet they are different in so many ways, especially in regard to the six opulences of the Supreme Personality of Godhead has in full. Full knowledge means that the Jivatma, the living entity, must know both his position and the Supreme's position. That is the full knowledge. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So that's a distinction between Paramatma and Atma. And what is the full knowledge? Right? The full Jnani is the one who knows, who understands the difference between the soul, right? His own soul, and the position of the super soul, right? The Supreme Personality of Godhead. Hare Krishna, Sachin.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Okay.
य एवं संतमात्मा मानव मात्मावस्थं वेद पुरुषः नाज्यते प्रकृतिस्थोऽपि तद्गुणे स मयि स्थितः. Although within the material nature, one who is thus situated in full knowledge of the Paramatma and Atma is never affected by the modes of material nature. for he is always situated in my transcendental loving service. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, yeah. So even then, what is being mentioned, Lord Vishnu himself is saying this, is that even though we are conditioned here, but if we are situated in the transcendental loving service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then we are not affected by the modes of material nature. Yeah, for the Ved Purush, yeah. And again, let's just read this. Varun?
When the Supreme Personality of Godhead appears in the material world, he is not affected by the modes of material nature. Similarly, those who are always connected with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even though they may be within the material body or the material world, are not affected by the material qualities. That is explained very nicely in Bhagavad Gita. Mam cha yo vyabhi karena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityetan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who is unflinchingly engaged in the devotional service of the Lord surpasses the material qualities and attains Brahman realization. In this connection, Srila Rupa Goswami says that if a person is always engaged in the service of the Lord with his body, words and mind, he is to be considered liberated, although living in the material world. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, yeah. It's huge. Like if somebody is totally in devotional service, he is pretty much considered liberated, yeah. Bhakti yogana sevate. So then he is Brahma bhuvaya kalpate, basically. So even though he's living in the material world, that's why we see all these lot of big saints and sadhus who are really true saints, right? We think they are living in this material world, but they are actually truly liberated because they have this full knowledge of Atma and Paramatma, and they are totally engaged in the devotional service, right? Ajay?
यह स्वधर्मेण मा नित्यं निराशी श्रद्धयान्वितः भजते शनकैस्तस्य मनोराजन प्रसीदति. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, continued, My dear King Prithu, when one situated in his occupation duly engages in my loving service without motive for material gain, he gradually becomes very satisfied within. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. And the interesting thing is, like, where is all this knowledge coming from, right? So as we can see in Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Vishnu himself is giving this knowledge, right? So he is speaking here to King Prithu, and we can also read that. Like, this is what Supreme Personality of Godhead himself is explaining. Yeah. So when somebody is engaged in his loving service without motive for material gain, then he gradually becomes very satisfied within, because he doesn't ask for anything. Yeah, he says, Bhajate shan kestasya manorajan prasidati. So then he becomes so happy within himself. Tarun?
Paritaya vakta guna samyaga darshano vishadha sayaha shanti me samva sadhana brahma kevalya ma shrute. When the heart is cleansed of all material contamination, the devotee's mind becomes broader and transparent, and he can see things equally. At that stage of life, there is peace, and one is situated equally with me as Satchinanda Vigraha. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Sachidanand Vigraha, yeah. I mean, this is so important actually. What is mentioned here, right, is when the heart is cleansed of all material contamination, right? And how is that possible? How can the heart become cleansed of material contamination? What's the way to achieve that? Right? How can that happen? What is the process? Like, how can we, like we are so materially contaminated, right? Conditioned. Always thinking about the bodily stuff. So how can we cleanse our heart of all this material contamination? So that's a devotional service, right? By doing the bhakti, right? Like that's how we start with the jap, doing the japas with the transcendental vibration of the sound of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, right? The transcendental vibration, this is how we purify our soul and cleanse our heart, right? And doing the constant devotional service, those 9 ways of Shravanam, Kirtanam, even like reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, right? Doing Kirtan, all those things continuously will help in cleansing all the material contamination. And then as we have read in many shlokas previously, right? As we keep doing the devotional service, what happens is Supreme Lord gives the knowledge, right? When we are doing the bhakti, he gives us the knowledge by which we can start, like we start understanding his position, our position, and start getting that knowledge, right? So where mind becomes broader and transparent, and we can see things equally. So it is not just a sentence. I think as we progress at each stage of that spiritual life, we can start experiencing that and understanding that and feeling that, right? And all that is given by the Lord himself once we start cleansing our material contamination. And the most important part which is mentioned is once that happens, at that stage of life, what happens is he is situated equally with me as Sachidananda Vigraha. So Sat, Chit, Anand. Sat is like eternal truth. Chit is the consciousness in total bliss, Anand. And then he is situated equally with Lord Shri Krishna, right? And this is what Lord Vishnu is explaining. Even though we saw in the previous slok, there is a difference in Atma and Paramatma. So even though the same qualities as part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? The eternal soul is still Sachidanand Vigraha. So very nicely mentioned here. So let's just read this, Ajay.
Sure. The Mayavad conception of Kaivalya and that of Vaishnava community is different. The Mayavadi thinks that as soon as one is free from all material contamination, he is merged into the existence of the Supreme. The Vaishnava philosopher's conception of Kaivalya is different. He understands both his position and the position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the uncontaminated condition, the living entity understands that he is the eternal servitor of the Supreme, and that is called Brahman realization, the spiritual perfection of the living entity. The rapper is very easily achieved, as stated in Bhagavad Gita. When one is engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, he is immediately situated on the transcendental platform of Kaivalya or Brahma. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So I think the important fact to understand here, right, is that we see that a lot of people are doing meditation and yogas, right, and self-tapasya like Ashtanga Yoga, and they are trying to get to that level, and that they also get to that level, being self-realized, right? But what happens is they think that once, and then they also get free from the material contamination. So they realize the soul, so they understand this, that they are not this body, right? They are not this body and they are the soul. So that understanding is fine. But then what happens is, with that understanding, they think they have now merged into the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And they don't have to do anything else. So then they are just totally merged. Whereas the difference is between a devotee, a Vaishnava, is that he also gets self-realized, and then but he understands the difference in his position and Paramatma. Right? Because him, Atma and Paramatma are not one. There is a difference, right? So, because otherwise what happens is in the other previous scenario, they declare themselves the God, right? And then nobody else is God, right? God is only one. That is Paramatma. So that is the difference, right? So here, what happens for Vaishnava? The living entity understands that he is the eternal servitor of the Supreme. That's when we surrender totally to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that is our Brahma realization. And that is actually the spiritual perfection of the living entity. Yeah? And that is when we achieve the Brahma. Hare Krishna, Shikshan Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna पढ़ेंगे.
उदासीनम् इव दक्षं द्रव्यज्ञानक्रियात्मनां कूटस्थमिमात्मानं यो वेदाप्नोति शोभनम्. Anyone who knows that this material body made of 5 gross elements, the sense organs, the working senses, and the mind is simply supervised by the fixed soul is eligible to be liberated from material bondage. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So this is the first qualification. And who is speaking this? Who is speaking right now? Who is giving this knowledge? To whom?
Lord Vishnu.
Right, yeah. Lord Vishnu appeared in the Mahayagya being done by
Bhrigu.
Prithu Maharaj, right?
Yeah.
Maharaj Prithu. So Maharaj Prithu is in the descendants of Dhruv Maharaj. That's what we are reading, right? So after the Ashwamedh Yagya, Lord Vishnu appears in the Yagya, yeah, to give the blessings to Maharaj Prithu. And Lord Vishnu is explaining this. So this is coming from none other than Lord Vishnu himself. Yeah. He is explaining it to Maharaj Prithu. And you know, you are so fortunate to read the Srimad Bhagavatam that we can read the same knowledge given by the Lord himself. Right. And what is the knowledge here is that anyone, bless you, the first knowledge is anyone who knows that this material body made of the 5 gross elements, and this is no arguments. We all know that, right? That the body is made up of those 5 gross elements. What are those 5 elements?
Air, water, earth, sky,
Yeah.
and fire.
And fire, yeah. So we know that our body is made up of those 5. The gross body is made up of those 5 gross elements. And then, of course, we have the sense organs. Yeah. And we have the working senses and the mind, right? Then there's a Suksham Sharir, which has a mind, intelligence, and ego, right? And then, of course, all the sense organs are eyes and ears and all that. So we know that this is how a body is made up of. It can be a human body, it can be any other body. They also have similar elements. So one who understands that this material body is simply supervised by the fixed soul. Because a lot of people don't even think that there is a soul, right? So the first qualification is to understand that we have this body and there is a soul. The soul has this body, right? We are the soul and we have got this body. That's a understanding. Like we have a body and a body has a soul. That's not a true statement, right? We are the soul and we have got this body based on different karmas and all that. Then, you know, after a certain time, the soul will get onto another body or get liberated or go to a spiritual world, depending on what we do, right? As a human body, we have the chance to do whatever we want to do, right? But what is Lord Vishnu is saying to Maharaj Prithu is, anyone who understands that this material body is composed of all that is supervised by the fixed soul, is eligible to be liberated from the material bondage, right? Because once you understand, then you are eligible. If you don't even understand, how are you going to be eligible to this? And actually, it's a nice purport, a little bit long, but let's just read this. Hare Krishna, Rinaji. Hare Krishna, padenge?
Yes, Ji. This verse describes how one can become liberated from material bondage. The first point is that one must know the soul is different from his body. The soul is called Dehi, or one who possesses the body, and the material body is called Deha, or the embodiment of the soul. The body is changing at every moment, but the soul is fixed. Therefore, the soul is called Kutastham. The change of body is enacted by the reactions of the three modes of nature. One who has understood the position of the soul should not be disturbed by the incoming and outgoing interactions of the modes of material nature in the form of happiness and distress. In Bhagavad Gita also, Lord Krishna recommends that since happiness and distress come and go due to the interaction of the modes of nature on the body, one should not be disturbed by such external movements. Even though one is sometimes absorbed in such external movements, he has to learn to tolerate them. The living entity should be always indifferent to the action and reaction of the external body. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, yeah. So that's the difference in Deha and Dehi, right? Sachin?
Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that the body, made of the gross physical elements, earth, water, fire, air, and sky, and the subtle elements, mind, intelligence, and ego, is completely different from the soul proper. One should therefore not be disturbed by the action and reaction of these 8 gross and subtle material elements. The practical process to attain this stage of indifference is to execute devotional service. Only one who constantly engages in devotional service 24 hours a day can be indifferent to the action and reaction of the external body. When a man is absorbed in a particular thought, he does not hear or see any external activities, even though they are enacted in his presence. Similarly, those who are fully absorbed in devotional service do not care what is going on with the external body. That status is called samadhi. One who is actually situated in samadhi is understood to be a first-class yogi. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, yeah. So the practical process to attain the stage of indifference is to execute devotional service. Yeah. By chanting, by reading Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Shravanam Kirtanam, doing service and surrendering to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I think we are going to pause here. Yeah. But the interesting part is, the knowledge being given by Lord Vishnu himself to Maharaj Prithu. Yeah, is what we are reading right now. It's nice. And this is Kartik month. So we will do the Damodar Ashtam, okay, which is around 10 minutes. And then we will pause. Yeah.
Yeah, I was listening to that in the day. It's very soothing.
Yeah, very soothing. And it's nice to hear it. Especially nice to hear it during the Damodar month. This is Kartik month is a Damodar month. It's very nicely explained also in that, right? So let's hear it. It's really in Kartik month also they say that if you do 1 round of japa, it's equal to, I think, 100 rounds, Prabhuji, Shiksha Prabhuji? In Kartik month, 1 round of Hare Krishna Mahamantra Jap is equivalent to how many, 100 or?
क्वांटिटी नहीं पता है, लेकिन इतना है कि बहुत ज्यादा फायदा।
हाँ, so it's like 100 times more. This thing is what I have read.
100 times, 1000 times.
Yeah, 1000. So that
100 times is very less. 100 times is very less. ज्यादा ही है.
1000 होगा, but the point is, the point is, it's more beneficial to do 1 round in Kartik month is equivalent to multiple rounds. And that's why this
लास्ट का 4 दिन भीष्म पंचक है तो ज्यादा इफेक्टिव है। 4 दिन का जो किया हुआ पूरे कार्तिक का इफेक्ट है।
That's another thing.
तो वो छक्का जैसा है ये, एक ही बॉल पे।
लेकिन अभी लास्ट 5-6 दिन ही बाकी है इसके। So we have this week and we have next week. So next week also we'll hear Damodar Ashtam. But let's listen to it and then we'll.
Sukam Patirika Kukanta Stita Brahman Namodaram Bhakti Bhaktam Triksvalila Bhirananda Kunde Svagosham Nimajantam Akyapayantam Viti Triksvalila Bhirananda Kunde Svagosham Nimajantam Akyapayantam Tadiyeshitagneshu bhaktachitatva Guna prematastam sattvakriti-vande Tadiyeshitagneshu bhaktachitatva Guna prematastam sattvakriti-vande Bhakti bhajau kritau cha bhaktim svakami prayacha namo shegraho mesti damodarena tata prema bhaktim svakami prayacha namo shegraho mesti damodarena. Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Right. Nice to hear the Damadaska.
It was amazing, wonderful.
Yeah. So we'll take a pause again for next 3-4 days, and then we'll see you on Monday. Yeah. It's Monday, 10 p.m. Okay. Have a nice weekend. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.